Time doesn't erase murder. It just hides it better. They said the case was closed. They said no one was watching. But someone always is. This is Santana True Crime.
Welcome to Santana True Crime. Tonight I have back on Tony Wright, who is the author of Things Aren't Right, The Disappearance of the Yuba County Five. We've had Tony on a few times, but I believe this case is one that you can keep on analyzing the facts and also analyzing some people's opinions. So I brought one other person with me today, Dr. David Hayes. He's a criminologist, and he brings some insight into this case. I think it's going to be unique. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, Tony, I'm going to start out with you. We've talked about this case a few times now, but I don't think it gets old. Everyone seems to want to discuss this more and more. And I wanted to just jump right into the theories of what happened that night. And one of those is that they were chased up into the mountains. And one of the questions I had was, do people believe that they were followed from the game that night?
That's a good question. It's been brought up since the beginning of the case. And there has always been a theory that the men in some way were either chased or followed either from the game or at a point in the town of Oroville where they exited the highway. And that was one of the theories they had brought up. Could they have run into some fans at Chico State that, might have been drunk or belligerent and may have tried to start a fight? Did they go to Oroville and something similar happened where they ran into someone? There's a possible confrontation, which leads to a chase, and the men are trying to evade these individuals and end up in the Plumas. So yes, there's always been a discussion of the men being chased. It's been discussed since 1978. It's still discussed today, and people have different theories that the chase began at the game, which I don't believe, because they were able to walk in the Bears market like nothing was going on. But for me, I do see a possibility of something starting in the town of Oroville when they exit the highway, which they had to do to get on the Oroville-Quincy highway, because there's no way they're just ending up on the Oroville-Quincy highway without making an exit at some point. And Oroville seems to be the most logical point to exit, to get onto the Oroville-Quincy highway, to get into the Plumas.
Yeah, and another kind of layer to this is that there was some feelings towards people with special needs and some of the disabilities that this group had. And so I do think that that's a logical thought, that maybe even when they stopped at the market to get snacks, there was someone else outside and the clerk just either didn't see them or that wasn't an important detail that they remembered.
Yeah, I mean, that's been brought up too, that it could have happened after leaving the market and then getting onto the highway, and then, maybe they exited into Oroville to get away from someone. I mean, it's all very possible. And it's just a matter of understanding why someone would continue the chase with the men from, Chico to Oroville and even beyond into the Plumas. Either they could have been high, drunk, mentally ill or something, who knows. But that has always been brought up as a possible theory. Some people have claimed that they had heard that there was an altercation in Bears Market parking lot. That has never been proven. There's, only theories about that. There's theories about, like I said, with Oroville as well. So at some point, something had to have happened where, the men may have been under the impression that there was some sort of like clear and present danger, and they had to get away, and maybe taking a different route was a possibility. But again, we only can work with theories in this case with no solid evidence.
So, Dr. David, would paranoia or the the mental disability or the disabilities that these gentlemen had, would that may have factored into they thought that they were being chased? Or I know that one of the gentlemen had schizophrenia. Is that something that could have come into play?
So that was that's Matthias with the schizophrenia that you're talking about. And it was medicated at the time. So, and by all accounts, completely even keeled. So I don't think the schizophrenia. I do not think that even despite the challenges that were apparent. So I mean, in modern times, we probably would have diagnosed at least two of the uh, uh, the the men with probably high functioning autism, which didn't really exist at the time. There's some developmental challenges, and then and then with Matthias with the schizophrenia and probably a personality disorder or two there as well. Also, we've got the PTSD from Vietnam with two of the uh, 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 quite possibly with two of the men, but I don't think they'd be hallucinating a chase. I've always been a little partial to the theory that when you look at the crime scene with the car the way it was left and the way that the men took off, that they persisted with a clear and present danger to them. That's a behavior of leaving the car the way it was, of walking into the mountains the way it was, not walking down but going back up. You know, these were not stupid people. These were just there's some a couple of decent critical thinkers and leader types who were in that group as well. So there had to have been something to force them in that direction. And you were mentioned that contextually at the time, we're talking the 1970s, it could easily be some 15, 16-year-old good old boys after a couple of beers chasing down those damn retards in the parking lot and having a fun time with it. And when and the men, our Yuba County men, not realizing that it wasn't as dangerous as they thought it was, that the potential for that is there, and then reacting and going on their to their eventual deaths based off of the idea that they were being presented with a danger without being able to read the context clues on the real social cues of these are just terrible people doing a practical joke, terrible sort of thing, running some people off the road. Completely feasible, especially at the time. A lot of the police response disregarded the men because of their developmental challenges. So, it was the society was a clear and present danger in and of, to them at that point. But something had to, in my opinion, force them up that road. They wouldn't have gone otherwise. And then if they were trying to escape danger, they would know logically that they came up, so going down would get them back to where they were. They had to think that there was another danger in there, a bigger danger to force them into a different direction. Whether or not that danger was as dangerous as they thought it was, I don't think they hallucinated it, but I think that they probably couldn't read bully-esque social contact cues like that. Probably, if that's the scenario.
About that. So when they fled the vehicle, it's not like they just went into the wood line and tried to hide. They went several miles in the snow.
Mhm.
Right.
And that's what seems very odd to me is I understand and I agree that there's some type of threat that made them make that decision to leave their vehicle. I'm all in on that. But it just seems odd that you would go that far.
Right.
Is it something that that one of them may have continued to panic and kind of like a fight or flight, and the others just continued to go and they didn't have the wherewithal to say, we're really far from this car and the threat's no longer present? Like, would
Mhm.
that be part of their critical thinking to be able to say, like, okay, the threat's now over? Would they be able to do that? Or
I mean, a war zone trauma response would, could possibly have someone take that leadership role. probably Matthias is taking the leadership role in that instance and driving his, his platoon to safety as far as he could consider to be safe. Perfectly feasible, if that kind of triggery snap was in there. Now, I don't know much about his Vietnam era experience or the and I'm drawing a blank on the other veteran, Madruga, on his experience as well. But I know they were in combat, and I know presented with a clear and present danger and a very tight knit group of men, taking over and doing what leaders are supposed to do and driving them to safety, probably in the opposite direction of danger, without fully realizing the pitfalls.
And Shones was up there too, so I'd like to know how much he played into
Shones.
Going from exactly.
We could make
Dave
an
and I have
entire
had
show
many
on this,
conversations
which
about this.
I was trying to bring in some other ideas, but you know what? We'll
Yeah,
get right into it.
Yeah, I mean, just because you're talking about leaving the car and then making the decisions they made. I mean, Shones has to be part of the factor because, okay, what interaction did they have? Was it? I don't think it was a positive interaction with Shones.
No.
I think it was a very hostile, confrontational situation that only made probably what was already a tense situation even more worse. And the men made the decision to leave a car, an operational car, and go into the Plumas. And I had a chance to talk to someone who was working for the Forestry Service at the time, and he said, "You can, day or night, you can easily get turned around up there. It doesn't matter how skilled you are. If you kind of just don't know your way around and you don't know how to you don't have a compass or know how to navigate, you're going to get lost and it's going to become overwhelming." Kind of like what you see in the the Blair Witch Project, where you just keep walking around. So,
Right.
And then I get what you guys are saying about Matthias and Madruga having that leadership ability. I agree that some kind of decision had to be made to get away from the car and not just wait it out.
Right, and it would be a
hours,
decision.
though.
Oh, go ahead.
Like, we're talking about hours of hiking, running, going through snow.
But the person I talked to said that a snowcat had gone through the area, and that does flatten and compact the snow. It doesn't completely clear it out. But still, they're walking through. I mean, yeah, they're still walking through snow, because you see with Ted Weir, when he's found in the trailer, that he has suffered from frostbite. And it's incredibly serious frostbite situation, especially with his feet and his hands.
And this is how many miles from the car to the cabin?
Roughly 12. So you're going in a northeast direction. But the crazy part about it, and I know we've talked about it, you have to follow a very specific logging road. Or it's not necessarily a logging road, but you can log in, have forestry work done up there. But it's a winding road of about 12, 15 miles, give or take, depending on, the exact location of everything. And that's not an easy walk, because, you're just following this winding road that's been flattened by, a snowcat, because you can't go across the land. The land is completely rugged. There's small creeks and streams that go through there. And if you don't know where you're going, you go right in the water. And what's already a bad hypothermia situation is now 10 times worse. So it's a very, it's a very fortunate situation that they found that road and walk that way. But again, as you mentioned before, you're not going down the Oroville-Quincy Highway back to safety. You're taking a completely different road.
Right. And you're continuing. I mean, you're talking about hours of.
Yeah.
And that's
and you're at a high elevation too. You're
right.
45.
So, I mean, if you were on a track and doing a 10-minute mile, you're still looking at a couple hours that you'd be spending. And they're not doing a 10-minute mile. They're probably doing a 20-minute mile, because they're in the snow and they're going uphill.
and I think the temperature was 29 degrees.
Yeah.
But
So maybe 5 hours, 5 to 6 hours of exposure
right,
without, if you're wearing tennis shoes, that's going to kill your feet. Your feet
yeah,
are going to
it's
get soaked.
tennis shoes and casual shoes were what they were
Yeah.
wearing, and they all had like blue jeans or trousers on, and the heaviest jacket was probably either Gary's or Bill Sterling's. Bill had a leather jacket. Gary kind of had a corduroy jacket. The rest had like light spring jackets, just thinking they'd go in and out of a basketball game and not really worry about, the weather too much.
So with Joseph Jones,
Mhm.
what gets me about this is I do think that he has some type of involvement. I don't buy this fact of he was just up there after he had his one beer and you're on a logging road in the mountains and then heroically you have a heart attack and you're able to go 8 miles to another bar. And yeah, I don't buy any of that at all. And some of the comments that we got on the last show was, and I don't know if this is true, which is why I wanted to ask you, Tony, is they said that he was known to go up there because he was growing weed, marijuana.
He was growing it on his property, from what I was told.
Do you think he was also growing it up there, like had bigger fields, and that's why he was going up, or was he just going up there to get money?
Yeah,
that
it's
time of
hard.
year.
But yeah, because it's hard to. You're not growing in February with a lot of snowfall, but I always felt like there was another reason that he was up there. Either was he just going to look around some cabins, know what I
Right.
mean, like that probably had been abandoned for the season and maybe just scavenge. Was he, because the lady who worked at Mountain House where he had unknown quantity, at least half a dozen beers throughout the day, she said, why is he driving north of here? He should be driving south back to Berry Creek. And people said, if you go north of Mountain House up towards, where the men abandoned the car at Rogers Cow Camp, it's also known as the Merrimack area. That's sort of no man's land. It's rarely traveled that time of year. There's only a handful of people, and you're lucky if someone can pull you out of the snow if your car gets stuck. And I've always felt there's got to be something up there. And I've talked to David a lot about this case because he helped with the book, with some research. I've also talked to people like Drew Beeson, who has a book on the case, and some other people. Like, what would be something up there that would have his attention? Because he's not the outdoor type. So there's something up there, either like abandoned cabins that are used seasonally by people, and maybe if you can get into them, you can, just take some stuff and pawn it or something. I just don't buy the drug thing that time of year. If it was summer, yeah. But that time of year,
that's a good point.
Not buying it.
I mean, I think we can, let's just for a second set aside the very specific nefarious act he was up there for, and just note that he might have been up there for something up to no good. There's a reason he's up there. So we could accept a couple of different theories to get the men to that point, and then the trauma being forced off into the road into the new place, into different areas, and then maybe that danger goes away, and then they're presented with a new danger in Jones, who now if someone sees him up there and he could, whatever he might want to do, puff up, get real big and bad and scary, and they're not going to know the difference, of course, in that sense. It's going to be
right.
So almost movie like, where they're going from one danger to another, gauntlet style, and forcing them in that direction. I'm going to run back to a point about the walk to the forestry area, the not the cabin, but the building. And as if we also go with that theory of someone makes a leadership command decision and the party is moving in that direction, the trauma of losing party members along the way is playing into this. And so if you're going into basic uh, as a member of the military, and the entire point is to get your as many of your party to safety as possible, then I could see where, like, Matthias would be completely focused on getting his final member weird to that thing, and getting him at least safe as possible, then going for help at some point. But as you're losing these members along the way, you're amplifying the sense of danger, you're amplifying the necessity of the mission. So all of this stuff is weighing heavily here. So it's not just like a terrible hard walk, it's a terrible hard walk as you're losing your family along the way, like Oregon Trail style. And so that we have to take all of that into account when we're starting to think of like the behaviors then that could get people into that point. So they're already pointed in that direction. South is out. We got to keep going north. I think it doesn't on the way up. You're going to make kind of like a hairpin turn to come down south again.
Yeah, it's a weird.
At some point,
it's not like a perfect curve. It's like this zigzag. Yeah, and there is a dip. You're right.
Right, and you could feel like you're going back to safety. Like we're heading back down now. Oh, heck yeah! We'll get out of this.
It's around the corner syndrome.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's just taking that path, and so many people have talked about, they've asked me how many guys made it to the trailer, and I don't know, but we know Weir and Matthias were in the trailer. We know that. It's hard for me to see him like not have Jackie make it to the trailer, because Jackie was so close, but I can see like Bill and Jack Madruga maybe saying like, hey, we'll meet up with you guys, just keep going. I can see something like that, just because how far south they were of the trailer. But maybe the three of them getting it. But
they didn't know about the trailer though. They didn't know what the end result was.
Yeah, and still like we'll meet up with you, or like maybe there's a point where do they even stop somewhere? I mean, it's hard to tell what they could have done that night. I mean, just continuous walking in the freezing cold at a high altitude. And people were saying, another thing like, well, with the moon, I don't think it wasn't a full moon, but it was one of those moons where you have enough reflection in the snow that provides some light. Yeah, you do get that on certain nights if you have a bright enough moon with some reflection off the snow. But still,
these
it's
people that haven't seen snow before, because
I mean, I get it. We live in Michigan, and
right.
we have some very dark and cold nights where it's miserable. And with these guys, because they even asked the parents during the investigation, these guys have flashlights in the car? Was there anything like that Jack would have put in the car? And his mom was like, maps was basically it. And,
why?
Nothing else. Huh?
It would be strange to have that in there. Why would
flashlight?
Flashlights, because he never drove, by all accounts, anywhere they didn't know where he was going anyway. Very specific, very limited.
They did make a trip to, I don't want to get too far off, but they did go to San Francisco, Sacramento the day before. I'm not too sure how well they would have known the school where they had basketball practice. They did make it back, but I think they were more comfortable going where they knew they were going, and they knew that they could be back at a certain amount of time and just, have some things done at a certain point in the trip. So I think the guys, overall, we're like that. They just wanted to go from point A to point B and not really, get too far off the course.
So, like based off of what we've seen, the reasonable scenario is some sort of perceived danger drove them into the mountain, and then Shones probably manifested as another point of danger, further exacerbating this issue. That of course, we can't go down, we can't stay here. This guy's here, we can only go up, and then that's probably, in my estimation, that's when either Matthias or Madruga, probably Matthias, would take point and snap into some prior training and try and lead his regiment to some vestige of safety. You know, if we can't go down and we can't stay, then we can only go up. There's probably something up there, that someone that can help us, because they wouldn't be familiar with anything anyway. They wouldn't know there wouldn't be a cabin. It just, probably wouldn't occur to them. And then as you lose your party members along the way, it's further driving, your leader into a paranoia state even. So I can't even imagine the abject terror running through all of them to get them moving in that direction.
Right. And I understand that too. I mean, I've done some long canine tracks before where we were in the swamp for a few hours going after robbery suspects. And when you're doing that at night, you don't use a flashlight. Like, you never want to turn on your light unless you absolutely have to. And you're literally just following a dog and running into stuff, running through the tree limbs and whatnot as you're following this, dog that's just completely obsessed with finding this guy and has no fear. But at some point, if you told me, like, where are we on a map with a lot of those, very deep woods tracks, there's no way I would have been able to tell you, like, yeah, we're there, because you're kind of zigzagging around. And that's another thought that I had is, if it's night, it's cold, these guys may have not have stayed on that path the entire time because they're in fear for their life. So, if you're being chased, you don't want to run down a path that someone can see. You're going to get in the woods. And maybe that would have disoriented them enough where, with that and the fear, they thought their only option was to keep on going forward.
I probably wouldn't think that the woods would have been an option, because they could see clearly that they weren't being followed. I think the danger was south, and Shones was there, and he wasn't going anywhere because, by all accounts, he did have a heart attack. So whether it was at that moment or not,
Right.
unless he figured out how to fake that too for the doctors.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
But I think that the following the quote unquote logging road probably would have been, just in their estimation, the safest bet, because if you haven't been somewhere before and there's a stamped down part where obviously a snowcat has come through, you would logically think that, oh, well, this went somewhere, it stopped somewhere, or it came from somewhere. So as long as we follow this, it's like following the river to try and find the highway. That river could be incredibly long. So, I don't think the woods would have been a part of it. I think that, given the circumstance, they probably made the decision to move forward as the safest route, not realizing that it was an incredibly long, incredibly arduous route.
So getting to that point and in the last show, we actually played a clip of the drive that they'd have to take, and it's very obvious the turnoff. Do you think that this could have been as simple as, you've got 5 young guys, they just went to a basketball game, they're having fun, and maybe they just weren't paying attention and took a wrong turn and got lost?
But you have to exit. You see, the thing is, it's not just one simple, like, wrong turn at a light. You have to, exit off the highway to get onto the Orville Quincy highway. It's not some kind of lane shift merge. It's an exit off the highway. So once you got off the highway, you're pretty much either at a light or stop sign. I can't remember. So you'd have to turn left. And then turning left, that takes you right into Orville.
So is there any other reason besides being followed or threatened that these kids would have made that decision?
I think so. There's a few that I've talked about with some other Yuba County Five researchers and family members. The first one is probably simply just a bathroom break. Someone may have said, is there a place I can stop and use the restroom? Another thing we've been thinking about is, okay, if they went to Bears Market after the game and it's candy bars and chips and things like that. Someone could have been like, yeah, I'm hungry, but somewhere got like hamburgers or something like that. And Jack Madruga was a big fan of Taco Bell, and there was a Taco Bell right off the highway in Oroville.
Okay.
Another thing is a few of the guys smoked. And if they had run out of cigarettes and said, do you think there's a place that has cigarettes? They could have, exited the highway and found, we're old enough to remember you can go in, not just a gas station, but you go into like a bar or somewhere, and there were the cigarette machines. And you can just, run in, grab a pack and go. So there's a variety of reasons why that they could have just said, well, in Oroville, there's such and such place, and you can use the restroom there, and you can get something to eat, or if you need cigarettes, you can do that. Sometimes they would call home if they were running late or if anything was going on. If they knew there was a payphone somewhere in Oroville, and someone said, oh, can we just call home? Because one thing I was thinking about, could they have made a change that night in plans where someone was going to crash on someone's couch, and they're just going to let people at home know, like, hey, I'm crashing on so-and-so's couch, but I'm going to get home super early, grab my stuff, and then we'll head to the basketball tournament. I mean, there's all these what ifs, or possibilities. And those are things that I think are very possible instead of being chased. That maybe they exit the highway, they get into Oroville for whatever reason, they run into trouble, and that leads into some sort of, smack talk, fighting, whatever. And then that leads into some kind of, fleeing situation where they got to get away from people. Like I said, it's just something that I've always found as a possibility, because Oroville is definitely, for me, the spot where everything just goes wrong.
I mean, I think there's a ton of psychological autopsy work done by people at the time, and even Tony, as far as the personality and general behaviors of the group. I don't think it was much of a group that makes snap decisions to go have fun and party somewhere else, and
Right.
or do a fun drive. Also, to access that road into the Blumis, that's not a choice that anyone takes lightly. It's not like a joyride, and I don't think Madruga would have gone joyriding, period, based off of, like I said, the psychological autopsy work that was done over the years. So, I'm whatever got them to Oroville, could be as benign as a Taco Bell run, but I'm with Tony. There's something there that there was a perceived danger that caused the choice to take the road.
What do you think that road provided for them? Do you think that they saw that as safety, or do you think that it was something where they thought that was the only option to get away from the person that was following them? I mean, why that road in particular? And do you think they had any knowledge of where that exit took them?
No, I mean, I don't think, I wouldn't guess that it was that road in particular, period. They could have been at any point and then needed to turn off due to the perceived danger. It just happened to be that road that Jones was on.
And, like you said, people say, oh, it was just a wrong turn. But if you exit into Oroville, take the Oroville-Quincy Highway, and get to the point where they abandoned the car, it's a long drive. And it's very, I mean, the only way I can describe it is during the day, and the weather's nice, it's a beautiful drive. It's a really, really nice drive. You're going over Lake Oroville, you're going over the Bidwell Bar Bridge, you get to see like all the trees and the land. It's a really nice drive. Now at night, it's a different ballgame. It's dark, it's ominous, it's, winding roads and, animals crossing the road. And it's a nerve-wracking drive too. I mean, if you're just not used to driving into the foothills of a mountain and no lights, and, it's not easy. But and that would have had to make them like very uncomfortable almost.
Oh, you're amping up the danger still.
Yeah.
If there's a perceived danger behind you, now the world itself is dangerous because you're so unfamiliar with it. I remember, moving to Arizona for the first time and then driving in mountains. Terrifying, absolutely terrifying. Still kind of terrifying, and and it just that was during the day, so I can't even imagine the stress levels in a brand new place. Something just happened. You're trying to get away from it, and now you're on what is, by all accounts, an incredibly dangerous, and it's getting snowier as you go. So the weather
Mhm.
is getting more inclement as the farther you go into this, and then you run into the town drunk, for
Mhm.
lack of a better term, and right there, it just panic sets in at that point, and whether or not, like I said, whether or not the danger was as present as they believed it to be is kind of immaterial because the choice was made to go, and yeah, it, it's a small town too.
Yeah.
There's not much.
Do you think that threat followed them the entire way from Orville all the way up into the mountains? Or do you think that, and I know this is complete speculation. The reason why I'm saying that is you were saying this is a long drive
It
and that
is.
the conditions are getting worse. And especially if you're a local to that area, you're going to know that.
Mhm.
And I didn't know at some point, let's say these are some younger kids that are harassing them because of their life challenges and they're being assholes and they're going behind them, honking their horns, flashing their lights, being aggressive drivers towards this group. And the five are thinking, oh shit, we need to get away. And they see this exit as an opportunity to do that. I mean, at some point, if you're on a long drive like that, either you've got to be really committed to being an asshole, which maybe
Right.
they were, or you're going to go, oh, you know what? Like, let's turn around and go back into town.
Right.
Which could have
Right.
easily have
Like,
been done, but the boys in that car, the men in the car, could we're talking about like different levels of perception too. So Madruga's driving. Everyone's paranoid and terrified about this. They're not going to make the "I don't see him anymore" decision. I think there would be a lot of trepidation into stopping, turning around, and going back because the danger's there. Whether
Right.
it followed or not, it doesn't matter. That's the direction it was in.
And there's
So
also
that's out.
homes. Yeah. And there's also homes up there too. People do live in the area of the Plumas, and Mountain House was along the road that they would have gone up to, stop at, the Rogers Cow Camp area. And there's also like cutouts in the road where you can just like turn and do like a U-turn to get, to go either north or south. And you kind of notice that driving up into the mountains, like you could have turned around, you could have turned around, you could have stopped, you could have done this. Um, so why not stop and, was there a light on at a home and knock and say, hey, something happened, and ask for help. So you have to take that into consideration too. It's not like it was completely desolate. Like there's some homes that dot the area. It's not a lot, but there's enough. And even Mountain House would have been along that route up into the Plumas. And I don't know if that was how late that was open or if it was, kind of a place that welcomed people at all hours of the night because it had lodging too. Um, so, I mean,
So we can't really say what the Mountain House would do or the people would do, but I don't
right.
think that would have been a factor for this particular group of people with their challenges to stop and go ask for help somewhere to a stranger's home. I don't think that would have been like a viable option for them.
Kind of feel like they would be imposing on someone or maybe.
Either imposing on someone or they're in a town. There's already dangerous people in this town. Why would we stop and
Right.
like go through this again?
Hmm.
And then Shones could have just put them in the cherry on the Sunday of
Gotcha.
this place is terrible.
That's true.
yeah. And I think that makes logical sense that they had, like what you're saying, Shown just happened to be there and he he was the cherry on top. It just, I wonder at what point Shones came into the picture.
That's been an area of debate. Some people believe that they met him at the very end, and when I talked to the people who recorded or produced the show Autobiography, Cold Case Autobiography, Motor Trend TV, that cold case show, they had wondered if Shones kind of came, if they can't see him, was he yelling at him? And if he yelled at him, did that scare him? Being pitch black up there, because we don't know the exact distance between the two cars. Because Shones kind of plays with that distance in his interviews. So if
and his wife wasn't sure either.
Yeah, so if he's like screaming and yelling like help, come, whatever, and these guys just hear that in the darkness in the middle of nowhere, it's like super freak out. And
so also,
and some people even think that Shones could have been down in Oroville.
If it's English, even like if he's in the middle of an event and screaming gibberish, and he may have thought it was English and help, but it could have been just anything.
Yeah.
So if he was having a medical event, they could perceive that as threatening, and
or how agitated of a medical event is it? A thrashing and yelling and screaming and like medical event. That's like someone is a solid 8-pack in already, and so any number of things like. But you were saying that some people believe that he was in Oroville too.
Yes, I've talked to quite a few people who think that maybe he could have gone up to the spot where his car was abandoned or where it got stuck, and had someone drive back into maybe say Oroville, and maybe he was just trying to look for someone to con into taking him up that way, and maybe just try to con him out of money or something, and maybe it didn't go according to plan, and this is the end result. So there are some people who are of the opinion that Shones could have probably found his way back down to Oroville with the aid of someone, and we don't know who that other someone could be. I mean, there's some people I have in mind. I'm not going to say it publicly, but and it could have been a simple con job. And could Shones have presented himself as someone that could be trusting to the five? It's possible, or maybe someone else who was working with Shones could have presented themselves in that way.
He was a social worker specializing in people with developmental challenges in a past life, prior to
in a past life, yes. In a
what do we know about Shones? And David, what's your evaluation of him?
Shones, there's you can't trust much coming from Shones and the people around Shones, and that kind of taints all the information, because what he tells different things to different people, of course. But I would assume that Shones is at one, we do know he's married, has a daughter with challenges, was a social worker in the past. He, I believe he was a veteran, correct?
Yes, World War II.
Yeah, World War II veteran, and frequented these areas. I mean, there's a reason someone chooses to move to someplace like sort of remote like that. And I don't think he was up to much good. I think that he probably had a drinking problem. Could be anything. Could be, years of work. Could be PTSD from World War II. Could be any number of things. But gainful employment, not so much. So always looking for the next payday. And at the end of the, do I think he's someone that would target and menace this group to the point where they run away and panic? No. He's a straight up scavenger. If it's presented to him, he's a what do we call it? oh no, I can't remember the name now, but he is not going to work very hard for anything, and so uh, something would have to be presented to him. We have to stumble upon it to turn the buck on it. So the idea of the con, I think, is not that. That's a little high level for Shones. My assessment is he's that town guy. Everyone's got one, and if he finds himself making a buck, it's pure luck because it's not like he's actually actively working for it. But he'll exploit people, but I don't think he plans much.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Shones, he was in World War II. We don't know exactly if he saw combat. He was was considered like a pharmacist mate or assistant, something like that. He was in the Navy. He was on a ship, and he was in some spots where mostly like backup almost. He was even in Iceland for a while. That was sort of an area, Iceland or Greenland, somewhere like that we had used for some bases and supplies and whatever. He claimed that he stormed the beaches of Guadalcanal. Someone that knew him said he made some comments about the division or group that he was with, and the guy's like, those guys weren't in the Pacific Theater. He had a long drinking problem, a long history of drinking issues. And he actually got busted in the Navy for being caught drunk in his quarters. That got him in trouble. He was arrested quite a bit for drinking and driving, being drunk in public. He worked in the paper industry, from what I've been told. His like counseling, whatever careers viewed as kind of bogus. Like he may have said he was a counselor or he was someone who worked with people with disabilities, but some people are like, nah, I don't think so. I kind of think he was almost by that point in his life, as they say, living off the dole. He may have been collecting unemployment. I don't think he had a job. His wife had a job at one point, like bookkeeping or real estate or something, but that was much later that I see her name in the paper. I don't know what they're doing. They claim to live in Sacramento, or somewhere outside of Sacramento. I'm going to say somewhere like Rancho Cordova or something like that. And then the place up in Berry Creek is like a winter escape or like a vacation cabin, which it's not by any means. They were living there, and their driver's license, both of them, had Berry Creek as their main address. Now, either that was done for tax, I don't know, for whatever reason, but it's hard to put them in Sacramento area at that time. I think they were living in Berry Creek. The Sacramento thing might have been kind of bogus, but Shones is just, as one of the guys who investigated the case said, Shones was just bogus all around. They didn't believe a word he said. They thought that he provided too much misinformation. He was a dead end kind of guy. His neighbor that I interviewed, pretty much backed up everything that law enforcement had to say about him being just totally bogus.
And that was my impression of him, is that he was a liar and a con artist. And that's what makes this case so difficult, because he's the only witness, right?
Outside the lady at Bears Market, but he's
right.
The last witness. And
right.
That's the most frustrating part, because as David has said, and I've said before to you as well, his story's changed in the press. So, he's telling, Chico's newspaper something, Sacramento's newspaper something, LA, like the Marysville, Yuba City newspaper, and a few others here and there. And it's like, well, this isn't adding up. And then you see what he says to the police or sheriff's department as well. It's like, man, this isn't adding up. Come on. And you're right. Even his neighbor said the worst thing that happened to the Five was them running into Shones. Like that was the last person they saw. And
do you think it's viable? Do you think it's viable that they never ran into Shones? That it's post event storytelling to try and make a buck?
See, I think
It's actually a really
that's
good point.
that is a good point, and I know that other people. I don't think other people have said it. Maybe one person want to know if Shones ran into the guys. I mean, the amount of money that they were offering, which in today's market would be like 10 grand, and you're Shones, and you're probably not bringing home a steady paycheck. 10 grand could probably, help you out a little bit.
Mhm.
And the reward said, if you give us information leading to, something in the case that helps us out, you'll get that money. So Shones probably thought, here's the story. Let's go. Because he might have understood, he might have been aware that other people saw, because Saturday, other people were up at that spot where his car was abandoned, the guy's car was abandoned. And Shones is like, oh, people have spotted me here. I've got to work my way out of this. And I'll create this story and say this happened, and, say they ran into the woods or whatever happened. And I got $10,000, well, at the time it was like $1,000, but I've got a lot of money coming my way.
Because
It's a very good point.
the idea of it. So if anyone knows the timeline of Shones admissions and reporting, it's you. So,
Yeah.
that you would be the one. But I'm looking at the variety and differences in the stories. They
Right.
go from 12 people in a red pickup to a woman with a baby to this to this to this
Mhm.
to this. And if I know anything about the behavior of criminality and content, it's they're going to change with the wind depending on who their audience is.
Exactly.
It's going to move. It's a moving target, and the one commonality will put him wherever it's at, because he, again, if this is for the money, he's going to need to be there, so he's going to have
Right.
that handle on that narrative. But they vary so wildly. I mean, like they vary even more wildly than serial killers telling a story to try and get out of something. You don't go from 12 to 2 to hallucinating to not hallucinating to a baby to the flashlights and the guys and ignoring him, also being nice to him, also then I shit myself, and then like
Yeah.
it's constantly moving in a different direction. The
Yeah.
only thing we
That's
know is I mean, his wife found feces there, so that, at least that part was true. But
and vomit too.
lots of it, which could have been a heart attack, could have been I just shit myself and puked because I drank a ton that day as well.
Right.
That's
And
what
I would go with that one.
But another thing is, I know that people who do suffer heart attacks, they will, they will throw up. I mean, it's common. But from what we know, him drinking, and it wasn't a beer. It was probably a fun day for him. I think all that was the result of a big day of drinking, and that's just so, you're right about everything that he says, because it's hard to keep those stories straight. And you're right, like the numbers change, his situation changes, everything. It's wild.
And he'll constantly play the victim too, so that's another
Yeah, I was
sign.
about to say that. Yes.
That's another sign that it's a kind of a con. So even in the that recorded interview with the family did with him, and I listened to a part of that. Even in there, he's like, I was going to call the police on those people because I was in trouble. Like,
Yep.
okay, so constantly the victim, always
Yep.
the center of the story,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of what's revolving around it. I mean, I'm putting even money on he never even met him.
I mean, at this point, anything's possible with Shones. And even if he had met the men or saw them, 'cause we keep saying 5% to 95% of his story his story could be true at 5% or at 95%, and we'll never know. And they never really did anything to, interview the guy. I mean, they only did like a few interviews, but it was like, 2 interviews, with law enforcement, a meeting with the family. He's talking to the press. Who knows what else happened? But Shones was just a guy that, man, he was just like something you just didn't expect here from the world of, missing persons cases and stuff like that. So he, once the case is over, he just, fades into, into history, like nothing ever happens. And
Because there's no cash involved.
yeah, and that's unfortunate. Like they never really follow up with like Shones or anyone else with the case. Like once, 4 of the 5 are found, and they call off the search for Gary. It's like, well, the case is done, and then they just close the book, and it's all over. And
bunch of dummies made a wrong turn. Well, that's what
Yeah.
happened.
Right.
and that's what they were talking about for a long time. That at first it was in the newspaper. Oh, this is foul play. This is foul play. By the time they find 4 of the 5. And there's questions about, why weren't you searching the trailers, and why wasn't this happening, and why wasn't this going on? They're like, oh, they just took a wrong turn. So at first it seems like they're sticking to a foul play theory, and then once there's a lot of questions about, why weren't you looking at the trailers, and how could this happen, and did you know about the trailers? Because the Forestry Service said they warned you, told you about going to the trailers, and then it's a wrong turn story.
Mhm.
So that's another frustrating part about the case. It just seems like at first they're looking at something like, did the men even drive this car up to this spot? Did someone force them? Did they jump in the car with a gun and, force the men to drive up that way? Is there more than one car involved in all this? And then all of a sudden it's like, wrong turn, close the book, we're done.
Do you think
Speaking
the
of
police
force
just didn't? Go ahead, David.
I was going to say, speaking of force going in, I've been wanting to ask Tony about his thoughts on the bully, Sharon's ex-boyfriend, I believe, or ex-husband.
Those are her husbands. So with
Yeah.
the town bully, here's the thing about the case. When I started researching the case, I called someone who wasn't tied to any of the families. It was just someone who was just a good resource. And they brought up that person's name. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll look into this person. And then other people just kept saying the name over and over and over again. Like, this person, you got to look at this person. You got to, talk to this person. And, I talked to them. And the thing about that is that's not where they operate, or they operated, where you see people being arrested. They seem to be arrested in they always seem to be in trouble in a certain area, a certain part of town, a certain county, a certain community. And they kind of do their mayhem in an area where they feel comfortable, and they have the leverage. They know the ins and outs of the area. The Plumas is kind of way out of there, and there's no information of them being arrested up there. There's no record of them anything being, people have tried to make connections about family and the area. And the town bully had family up that way, but there's a lot of bad people in town where the 5 lived in Yuba City, Marysville. But there's also a ton of bad people up in the Plumas too. Just hellraisers, off the grid, anti-government people, marijuana growers, Hell's Angels, survivalists. So it's like, these people are everywhere that just seem to be these just super bad dudes just looking for trouble. And with the town bully theory, it doesn't go away. That's the thing about that theory. So many people who are not friends, who are not connected, who don't talk to each other, keep bringing this guy up. And it's something I talked to other Yuba County 5 researchers about. Like, this name doesn't go away, and it won't go away. And that's the issue there. If so many people know about this person having a hand in the case, and we know they didn't act alone, from what I've been told, they had a few other people helping them. And those names vary from the person you talk to. And that even complicates matters further, because they'll say, this is the group that did it that night. And you're like, okay, I've got these names, but now you've got a few different names. And that's just the thing with the whole town bully theory. It's like,
What's this town bully and his group of friends? What are the type of things that they're doing? Because eventually you've got to look at what's the end game, right? Like, are
yeah,
you just harassing them? Are you trying to rob them? Are you beating them up?
right.
Or like, what's the end goal?
Yeah. And so the town bully apparently had made a threat that he was going to go after someone because, Gary's sister was, divorcing him, and, he was going to go after Gary and take him out to, make, his ex-wife sorry that she ever left him. Now, he's been involved in some stuff over the years, and it's, not the best stuff. Um, you can go out and find his name, and you can, do a lot of research on this guy and see what he's done over the years. It's not good stuff. And
What are some of the things he's done over the years?
he's shot at police, or not shot at police. He's fought the police, fist
Okay.
fight. He's too much fun. He's fought with the police. He shot up a house. There's sexual assault. There's a lot of problems with drugs. There's just other mischief here and there, and stories that people have told about, fights and intimidation tactics, threats of being killed, ties to other cases that can't be substantiated, even, put together
Do you,
easily.
do you think this persists because of? As I did, apparently he was a pastor and made a confession in front of a congregation to it.
Well, so here's the problem with the town bully's confession. And so it was probably, I want to say 1994, when the town bully reportedly did a confession at a church in the Yuba City area and said they did all these terrible things. And one of them, if you read into it the right way, is a confession about the disappearance and deaths of the Yuba County Five. So person A heard this at the church. Person A tells person B. Person B tells the person C. Person C goes and talks to law enforcement and said, hey, I heard this confession. Excuse me, so-and-so said this at church, and you should look into this. And law enforcement's like, well, wait a minute, did you hear this directly? And so he explains the story from person A to him. And they're like, all right, we got like a chain of hearsay here. This is not going to help our investigation at all. So they said they'll follow up with this whole, confession or something. And there's a name of a member of law enforcement in the report. And so I reached out to him and I said, hey, did you ever talk to the town bully about this? And he goes, no, I don't know what you're talking about. Why is my name in the report? I don't know anything about this. So for me, that was just an incredibly frustrating moment, because it seems like, around 1994, they had this opportunity to maybe close the book on the whole town bully theory, but they just never really did anything with it. And that's really the first thing that happens with that case in 78. Because if you look at everything from 78 to about 94, there's nothing going on. The only thing that probably is even close to being something with the case is, I think Gary's mom had to go before the courts and like claim some money or something like that. I mean, it's almost, saying like, he's passed on. There's this money. And I don't know if she was like the executor of his estate or whatnot, but she would have been able to get that money. I don't know if it was in savings or like a life insurance policy or something, or maybe something from the federal government for being a veteran. So, even Social Security or anything, I just don't know. But those are like the only things going on with this case. So, this opportunity in 94 to look into the town bully's confession. Now, if you look at that town bully's confession, he's confessing to like a ton of other crimes in the community. And one of them is, if I look at that one, or a couple of them correctly, one's the murder of Donald Garrett, who's the executive director of the Gateway Projects, who was set on fire in an arson attack. we've done some research. We've talked to some people. I'm not going to, Drew Beeson and a few other people have looked into it, but they found another name. It's not the town bully. And that doesn't add up. The town bully also admitted to a murder, which sounded like the exact murder of two young girls in the area named Valerie Lane and Dolores Derryberry. They were murdered in cold blood, shot almost like point blank range, and DNA evidence convicted two guys, and neither one of them is the town bully. The problem here, and even talking with the town bully, there's a credibility issue with anything that comes out of his mouth. And that's a huge problem. It's very Shones-like, where they're the victim, the world's against them, and they've done all this stuff. And you're kind of like, I don't buy this. And I think that's a huge problem with, what you got with the town bully theory, is that there's a huge problem with, first of all, the town bully's credibility. And if he says anything, how much face value can you put into it? Now, if other people know something about the town bully and what he's done, shouldn't they be talking to law enforcement? And, would that change anything with, Yuba County and the way they were handling the case? If more people went to them and said, let me talk to you about the town bully. And has anyone gone to him and talked about him? I don't know. They haven't really said anything to me about it. So that's really, really frustrating.
Is the sheriff's department even interested in this case in the 90s, or are they?
Oh, in the 90s.
Yeah, I meant,
no.
It sounds like from what you were saying before, they kind of were dismissive in the beginning of saying, oh, the kids made a wrong turn, and essentially tried to pass it off that way, right? Because no one was actually murdered.
Right. Did nothing. I mean, the thing is, like with Ted Weir being I always feel bad saying this, but he's like the only person that was found intact, that his remains weren't scattered. They took a look at Ted, and, with, what they were doing at the time with, autopsies, nothing looked like it was out of the ordinary. Now, with what they had from Jack Madruga's remains, they did show that he had broken his ribs prior to his death. When did that happen? How did it happen? We don't know. Could he have been, horsing around with friends? Could something happen at basketball practice? Could he have fallen at work or at home or somewhere? It's possible. Could something have happened that night where they got in a fight with some people and some guy sucker punches him in the ribs? If they get in a fight or something in Orville, and this is how everything starts, that's a possibility. But unfortunately with Jack, like Bill Sterling and Jackie Hewitt, they're very limited in what they can work with when it comes to remains. So they couldn't really say, like, I don't see any stab wounds or, any other kind of like defensive wounds or anything that would show these guys got into a fight. But, Ted didn't have any, marks or broken bones or any issues. However, he had really bad frostbite, from his feet, and, it caused a lot of discoloration and I guess swelling and whatever, like up to his knees. And, his hands were badly frostbitten too. So again, like, we don't really know what was going on that night. And, it's just hard to figure out what was going on. And did the town bully do it? Did someone else have some hand in this, like Shones? But we do know, like, when they were doing research in the case or doing their investigation work, they found out there was a big fight in Oroville at a bar the night the men went missing. And they were trying to say, okay, could the guys have run into these guys? And what time did this happen? Well, the fight at the bar may have happened around 1 a.m. So it'd have been long after, the guys got into town. But were those people somewhere else, and were they causing trouble somewhere else? Could they have run into the men? It's
could have been mistaken identity too. Maybe they drove a similar car to the guys that
Yeah,
they're fighting with.
it's always possible.
Yeah. That's what's so hard about this case is that you hear these rumors, they sound really good, but then the people behind them aren't credible. Like
Right.
the town bully,
Right.
it's like I don't believe a word that Sean said. And
Yeah. And
I
and
I think
yeah,
David, you brought up a great point, and honestly, I've not even thought about that Sean was even there that night, and
I
that would
mean,
not shock me.
there, but not encountering him. His car was there, and he was. That.
Yeah, I mean, he may have been there on the mountain, but he may have never actually I don't believe the whole heart attack thing or a few things, but
and walking 8 miles the day,
yes, after his heart that just sounds like such a heroic story.
right.
It
You really
reminds
do.
me of, have you ever had a friend or coworker that always tries to make things about them during a conversation? Where they'll,
Yep.
if you said, my mom just died, they would say, oh my gosh, let me tell you about the time that my cousin got hit by a truck and so and so committed suicide. And they just want the attention on them instead.
This is
Right.
more
And that's,
important than that. This is the same thing, but far more important because he's framing himself as the hero of it.
Right.
Inherently an unheroic person.
Right.
right.
Inherently. But has to frame himself as the hero of this because that's the narrative that's the only narrative that's going to make this comport with whatever reality he's trying to perceive at that point. So I mean, the more I think about it, the more I think Shone's probably never interacted with them.
And it's possible. I mean, and another thing that we've talked about. I mean, and I know I've discussed it with David. So if he has a heart attack around 6 o'clock, Friday the 24th, and he's in the car until maybe it would have to be 11 o'clock if the guys, are leaving Chico. They probably stop in Oroville and they get to that spot in the Plumas. That's not an easy, quick drive. So Shones is what, 5 hours twiddling his thumbs or doing whatever up in the Plumas. He says he's leaving his car running. And I know the car experts will weigh in on this big time. They've been divided on this too. If the car could have kept him warm because it's a Volkswagen Bug and it has an air-cooled engine, is that keeping him warm with legitimately warm air? Is it blowing like a sad, lukewarm type of air that is kind of doing the job, but not keeping him warm enough? And he also claims that he's had the windows rolled down on his car and had his legs dangling out at one point, or he had windows cracked. So what's he doing? Is he really leaving the car running? Or is he like bundled up in a car somehow? And if he's doing this, and cold temperatures, I mean, is he going to be a victim of hypothermia? And if he's spending, let's say, 6 p.m. the 24th and arriving at Mountain House between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. on the 25th, I mean, he's well over 12 hours up in the mountains with probably little to no heat, a lot of exposure, but he's not treated for any kind of issues related to frostbite or I guess you wouldn't even say hypothermia, pneumonia, whatever. To me, we're looking at something that's very suspicious here. And some people may say, well, some people are hard, they were, they're born in certain parts of the US and they're used to it. I mean, I just don't get it. I mean, I've lived in the Midwest my whole life. I mean, I'm cold on certain days. I'm not going out and, I can handle it. No. And so, Shones makes all these claims. He's falling into the mud and into the snow. And, if he's doing this and getting like pants wet or maybe a jacket wet or his feet wet, and it's still below freezing temperatures, that's going to play a role in hypothermia. So again, this guy just walks in like, woe is me, and gets an aspirin and then gets a guy to drive him home. A lot of this just doesn't make sense. And like we said, Shones is just, I mean, he's like a he's a book by himself.
So, I mean, you're a storyteller, right? And when you're creating a narrative, like he tells a wonderful story about him and some side characters that disappeared.
Right.
And
Exactly.
and so
You
and
should
that's
write
I
a
mean,
fiction book about this, actually.
you don't need to. You got Shones. He already wrote
Yeah.
one. And that's kind of like the hallmark of it for me, because con man's going to con, someone who's going to exploit people is going to exploit.
Yep.
And even if he did meet them, he would turn this into a story about him anyway.
Mhm.
Whatever was true and valid, it's going to be a woe is me, I'm the victim, but look how heroic I performed. No one helped me. I mean, exactly what we
Mhm.
saw. And so, I mean, they would have had to have passed by him, right? At least the car.
The car would have been behind him. So Shones is ahead of them from what we know.
Right.
And we don't know how far ahead he is. We actually tracked down someone who was on the mountain or in the foothills the day after with some people. And they saw Cindy Shones, Joe's wife, with another guy. And the person was young at the time. And he remembers either like his parents or family or friends just arguing with Shones's wife about something. And I think it was probably the position of the car in the road or maybe them not helping. But there's other people up there and they see Shones's wife up there with the car. And then by Sunday, the car is gone or the Volkswagen's gone, but the Montego's still up there that Madruga was driving. So people do see Shones's wife up there. But when Shones is in the hospital, they're probably talking to him probably sometime around between March 3rd and March 7th. I can't remember the exact date, but that's the first interview they have with Shones. So he's got time to do whatever he needs to do to get his story, worked out or whatnot, and try to get his wife on the same page.
What do you make of what he says in the bar? I should have done this 2 years ago.
Yeah, that's so many things. The one thing everyone wants to look to is that it's directly tied into the five. Like I should have done something to those guys 5 years ago, but I don't buy that. There's something else. Either his health, I should have had a surgery 2 years ago. Maybe he saw a doctor and you're like, you're not doing so well. Or it could have been something tied to what was going on that night, what he was doing, which we'll never know. And maybe it because it didn't go according to plan, and maybe he had an opportunity to do it 2 years earlier and probably would have gone better. That could be it. But people who were at Mountain House, and it was more than one person, they all heard him say that. I should have done this 2 years ago. So whatever he was doing that night, he probably realized he's you get to be a certain age, you're like, I'm not 30 anymore.
Right.
And that's probably what it was, that Shones probably realized that whatever he had to do, he just couldn't do it anymore. And he just probably felt defeated and frustrated with himself. He makes no mention of the five, no mention of their car being abandoned up there. So, this started working into David's theory.
That's telling that he doesn't mention them at all. Although it was this incredibly terrible event / heroic / whatever he decided it is at the moment, that he wouldn't think of them. So do you have any idea? I'm fixated on Shones actually right now. I'm kind of drilling in on Shones. Do you have any idea what his health was like 2 years prior? When did it start to go downhill?
I mean, I don't know, but the guy's been drinking most of his life. I mean, it seems like he's been a friend of the bottle for a long time. So it's hard to tell exactly what his health was. I mean, medical records weren't available with the report. And I've always tried to look up stuff to see where his name pops up in the papers, like a squad run or something like that. But no, he's just getting arrested
Drunk driving
and
stuff.
things,
That's pretty
yeah,
much
and,
it.
yeah, and things kind of, it wasn't as busy up until that moment in his life, like drunk driving arrest. I know there were some things going on, and they were his family. I want to say early 70s, maybe as far up as 75, maybe 76. They were in Santa Ana down that way. So they were south, and they just somehow find their way up to the Sacramento area, and then eventually get into Berry Creek. Now, David's been talking about this, with your life, and you make these decisions, and you end up there. I always feel like ending up in like a place like Berry Creek is, for Shones, like the end of the road. It's the end of the line. This is like last chance city for him to get his life together. Could be a series of mistakes. Like I said, I don't know anything about his health. The guy that was his neighbor said he wasn't an outdoorsman. He wasn't a healthy looking guy. If he's drinking a lot, he's probably doing a lot of damage, especially to his liver and his heart, and Lord knows what else.
I can't believe you would say that he's not a healthy guy. I mean, he walked 8 miles in the
I know.
snow,
I know.
uphill both ways.
He's a hero.
Probably like carried
literally
a
uphill both
small
ways.
child with him and like rescued a cat.
Yeah,
along the way.
It's so weird because
small busload of Amish tourists.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to people about the 8 Mile trek, and some people say like, oh, my grandfather had a heart attack in the steel mill and he still finished his shift. And some people are like, look, I had a heart attack and I wasn't, there's no way I could have done that. And so those opinions vary. But just the one thing with just the walk, it's 8 miles. There's no other way to explain it. Like the guy walked 8 miles, and that's not, like we even said about the 12-mile walk for the guys, even though they're going up into a road that's covered by, flattened by a snowcat, Shones is going downhill. I get it. But still, it's 8 miles at high altitude, below freezing temperatures.
Right.
And, if he's falling and stumbling as he said he is, and trying to catch his breath, and,
And
trying
that's
to
no
like refocus.
flashlight. Right.
Yeah, he probably doesn't have a flashlight, and, probably no one else up there willing to pick him up. It's quite the story. And surviving that, and this just adds so much to a case that's just full of theories and what ifs, and what woulda, coulda, shoulda happened, and there's really nothing that we can really go with when it comes to Shones, because a lot of people that saw him at Mountain House, a lot of those people have passed away. I know there's probably a couple of people who might be alive, but they're nowhere to be found, and I've tried to hunt down those people, and I've had no luck. And Shones, I mean, he just died with the story, and we'll never really know what happened.
He died with a few stories.
Yeah, he died.
Different versions.
Yeah, he had. Oh boy, yeah, that guy lived a very interesting life. The Joe Shones book would be something worth reading.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to you writing it, Tony. And
yeah,
David, maybe you can write the forward.
Please.
Sure.
Because it was like, when I talked to David about the case, there was the guy Slater Judd who made all the claims about, bogus.
That guy's fascinating.
You said he was the gift that keeps on giving, and so is Shones. These are just characters involved with this story. Even like the bogus guy or the lady who thought she saw him in a convenience store 50 miles away in Brownsville, and people who thought they saw him at the mall or the roller rink or at the airport, or the lady who thought she saw him in LA.
My personal favorite are the psychics, calling in psychics. I love.
Oh, that was rough.
My book, when I get this off the ground, is going to be on why police use psychics and case studies, because it's fascinating.
Oh, it is.
And I talked to Jack Beecham, who was the person who he was the undersheriff at the time, and he said he had gone to some kind of conference, and someone was singing their praises and thought that this was the way. And there are audio tapes of two psychics that spoke with the families. The first one is Dr. Gloria. I can't remember her last name, but her work was like, ooh, that's not right, because she's claiming to see visions of dead people, and she said Shones is one of them. I'm like, yeah, Shones is still alive.
He just did an interview.
Yeah.
He's like,
And then there was another lady, and I forget her name. She had a name like Sister Amy or something like that.
they always do.
She was so off. It was so painful to listen to her audio tape that it's like, are you guys fans of The Office, the US
Yes.
version? Remember Scott's Tots episode?
Yes.
Like the one where he promises the kids that he'll send them to college, that he'll have the money, but he doesn't have the money.
Oh
So
yeah.
he has to face the kids and tell them he doesn't have the money. It's like that in that tape. It's like ultra cringe, and it's so painful to hear. But
Do you
also,
have the
there's
tapes?
I have the tapes of Dr. Gloria. I think it's Dr. Gloria Daniel. She's with like some new age spiritual California church that's
Oh,
totally
I'll pay you
been-
for these. I need these.
Yeah, I'll get you. And the other one's Sister Amy. I've got to find hers. The Shones tape it's the one tape we needed in pristine condition, but it's in the worst condition possible. But I give a lot of credit to a podcaster or a YouTuber, the Missing Enigma. His name's Nick. He went through that tape and made a really good, probably solid transcript. I went through it before him years ago. I think Mopac Audio did, and it was really muddy. And I know Dave's listened to it and some other people, and it's a tough listen, just because it's a lot of like warped audio, but there's like these moments of clarity where you're like, oh wait, what did he say? And then it's kind of low. So of like all the things we needed to be beautiful as far as a tape, that was the one where everything went wrong with it. We're like, oh man, because I've got like a recording of Jim Grant talking to, he's the sheriff, and he's talking to the families, telling them not to hire a private eye because, the private eye will probably take their money and run, but it's up to them. And there's the psychic meetings, and the Shones one. I just wish that was clear, because there were some things that he was saying that it would just be so important to have that information of how he was describing the Plumas that night, and where the car was, and how much snow there was up there, and his experience.
Right. But the problem with all that is, even if you had a clear tape of him talking for 2 hours, how much of that time is he actually going to be giving you credible information?
See, that's the problem. With anything with Shones, you just, like I said, it's the 5% or 95%.
Right.
And the more time that went on, as people would talk to him more and more, he could gather more pertinent, real, valid information about the scene itself. So if he didn't know it, he could know it at that point and pass that knowledge off as firsthand.
Yeah, and he never offered to come forward to help with the investigation. I mean, it almost seemed like he was dragged to the sheriff's department to meet with these people. Because once the stories were over, he's just like, yeah, I'm kind of done with this. I'm not getting the reward money. What's the point of talking about it?
Yeah, and the only other point would be if people knew that he was up there, and kind of like a Richard Allen situation with Delphi, where he voluntarily talked to the police and told them that he was on the bridge that day, thinking that people obviously saw him that day, and so he wanted to have an alibi and be kind of like the first person to come forward.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I if you hear reward in any information leading to insight. If he has these guys disappearing into the woods, he's kind of clear from anything after what happens in the woods. I mean, he's telling you they went into the woods. They went into the Plumas. And so they went that way. So give me the money. I think that's probably his thought. And he probably thought that, they're not going to survive in the wilderness, being up here in the snow and below freezing temperatures. He was probably gambling on that. But other people were trying to call in, and they had insane stories, just bad sightings in Sacramento. Like I said, the furthest one away was LA. A girl was on a bus. I think she was a student at USC or UCLA. She's like, oh yeah, those guys got on the bus. Like, man, lady, no.
This is not pre-internet too. So can you imagine the web detectives now? Holy macaroni.
Yeah. And this case has really brought out a lot of people. There's a lot of UFO people. There's been a few Bigfoot people.
I've actually seen that comment. Someone said it was UFOs. I think our last
it has to be. Yep.
Yeah, one person I know, or I don't know him, but I've heard from them that it's very similar to Travis Walton's experience. I've heard Bigfoot. What else I want to say? MK Ultra was doing something at the time.
Yeah. They routinely worked with basketball teams with the special.
Yeah.
Right. That's what those thing.
But over the years,
remote viewing was happening that time too. I meant maybe they could remote viewing. Yeah.
Oh.
So they should have used that to be able to find the kids.
They did, but they said Jones was dead.
Yeah. But some people over the years have actually brought up some interesting theories of their own. One lady said, could the car have had a carbon monoxide leak? And if they had the windows rolled up, could that have, impaired judgment and, caused them to wander off and maybe become paranoid? Some people thought the guys were doing drugs together, and that's not the kind of group they were. But I mean, other people have thought, could they have picked up a hitchhiker, and that's always been brought up. And the hitchhiker may have pulled a gun and, had him drive up that way. But again, these are just theories on top of theories. Lance Ayers, who was the lead investigator of the case, said towards the end, I have 1,000 theories, but I can shoot holes through all of them. And it just didn't make any sense. And the getting lost theory for everyone, they try to say, well, it's the simplest, most logical explanation. But at the same time, for that to happen, there has to be all of these things happening, these decisions that just don't make sense. Because what we haven't really talked about is the fact that the highway, or the Oroville Quincy Road that goes through the Plumas, was unpaved in the spot, and there were potholes. Now, Jack Madruga didn't want to drive on a road like that. If it was unpaved, if he saw potholes, he would just say, that's not for me. Because there's even a story of him stopping and telling Jackie Hewitt to get out and walk home because he wasn't going to drive on an unpaved road that had potholes. So he's driving this car in a location he hates, it has the road that just makes him very wary and uneasy. Plus, a lot of guys didn't like the dark. They didn't like the snow. They didn't like the cold. So why are you putting them in this area? And like I said, there's plenty of opportunities to turn around and just go home and just get the hell out of Dodge and just, and also the car, when it was, hot wired, had a quarter of a tank of gas. So was there any kind of concern at the time? Do we have enough gas? Are we okay? But then again, we don't know if they were sitting in the car and maybe running it for a while, because we don't know exactly what time they left the car. They could have been intermittently turning on and off the car, running it to keep warm, and maybe trying to devise a plan. And if Shones comes back at some point to his car, scares the guys and they go off, Shones is probably like, this probably is going to turn out bad for me if they find I'm up here. What's my story? But again, it's it's part of the frustration with the case. You have all these possibilities that, all these routes you can go down and theories you can work with. But at some point you get to a moment of like, do I run with this? I mean, is this really what happened? And, like we've been talking here tonight, I mean, we've been going down, a lot of different avenues. And I know that they still have the case today, still cold case, especially because Gary's never been found. But I have talked to them at Yuba County over the years. I haven't heard from them recently, but they're still looking into possibilities or willing to listen to people who have something to say. And I think that's important. And it's good to know that they're still willing to, hear, theories or maybe reach out with people and try to piece together something to make sense of that night.
Right. I think investigatively, we should go back, or even behaviorally, we should go back to that idea of Occam's razor, right? With the all things considered, the simplest explanation, just like we were talking about with Nancy Guthrie before. And it's in order to make the decisions they made, there has to be the perception of danger. I think that has to be happening. Whether it was as dangerous as they thought or not, take Shones out of the equation, take everything out of the equation. The choices they made to get on that road, drive that far, and then walk north. I think we have to have a perception of danger, like something was happening that they thought. And so if that's we get to that baseline, it wasn't as simple getting lost. I mean, yes, they were lost, but it was because of another reason. I think that's probably where everything has to start, at that very simple point.
Yeah, and getting back, I mean, I've always felt Oroville's the place to really look, maybe try to dive in more and have people come forward from that area to figure out, they had to have seen something that night or interacted with the guys in some way, shape, or form. I have always believed that there's more there that has been researched or sort of dug up by investigators at the time. I don't think they really did a thorough examination of Oroville as far as what was going on that night. They had a report of a fight because they pulled a radio, or not a radio report, maybe a police report from town of a bar fight. There was a guy that was in a red pickup truck that got pulled over for drunk driving that night. I want to say maybe 4 a.m. But those sort of like finds didn't really lead to much other than, there was a bar fight and there's a drunk guy on the road in a red pickup truck, but we're not, there really isn't anything we can do to link up. But again, I mean, anything at this point is helpful. Because from what people know, and I feel like there's people who are still alive from that night who know what happens and know what happened and could share that information. Because
the problem is now that the age of the people that are still around that were or may have been around that night were getting into their 70s, 80s, maybe even 90s.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with these cold cases, is that we do have the public support. This case is getting consistent attention. People are still interested in it. They still enjoy talking about, which is great. And I think that also keeps the memory of the five alive, which is equally important in this. That we can't go back. This case may never be solved, and we may not be able to absolutely say this is what happened that night. But we do have the silver lining that the memory of the five gentlemen that were lost that night, that will survive, and that survives by people continuing to talk about it, as well as people reading your book.
Yeah.
Things Aren't Right, the disappearance of the Yuba County Five. And not to give you a book plug for no purpose, but books like that are important because I mean this case would have been lost if people like you didn't write about it. There wasn't a murder. Um, this is a case where five kids, um, I'm sure it's classified as a disappearance or missing person or a deceased person. And those cases typically don't get the attention of law enforcement as a cold case murder from the 70s, where
Right.
we still may be able to run some DNA on it, and we still may put the effort into tracking down witnesses. And I don't know if that's occurring or not in this case, to be clear, but I would doubt it that from then, unless someone actually comes forward to law enforcement and says, this is what actually happened that night, and this is how I can prove that, eh, you know, the rest of it is really speculation, which is why I think this case is so interesting is you can sit around and talk for hours about what you believed happened that night, uh, and each of us can pick holes in it or have some type of defense about why that would have worked or why that didn't work. And, no one can really be right or wrong in it because we don't know the truth.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's good. Like I said, I'm glad the book's out there. I'm very happy that, David was able to help with the book and do some research. And then Cameron, you've had me on the show and you've had David on your show and, talking about the case. And, David's talked about other things as well. So we're glad that people are out there interested in the case, want to know more, are willing to share their perspectives, whether, people I've talked to have a background, I've talked to a few people who have a background in law enforcement. Some people have a background in special education, or they're just parents, caregivers for people with, people who are on the autism spectrum, or maybe they're caregivers for a family member who has, schizoaffective disorder or something like that. And then you meet other people who had maybe similar things happen in their family, or maybe experiences where, they've lived in the Plumas or know the area very well. And by getting those people to share some things here and there, it's given me more perspective on the case, and it's helped shape some of my ideas or theories or whatnot. And that's huge, because there's still people who are going to, find podcasts or the book or videos on the case or articles, whatever, and they're going to want to keep going down the rabbit hole, and they're going to keep wanting to find more. So I encourage people to, do your research and find out more about the case. And, it's okay to ask questions and, try to find more into, some of the actions that night. And it's okay to question like some of the things that happened during the investigation, and maybe some of the things that they've heard, like, town bully, Joe Shones. You can find out quite a bit about these people by doing simple, research on, newspapers.com or something like that. Find out more about the case. I mean, it's a facet. Yeah, I thought it was just, pretty simple at first, and then the more you get into it, the more you look at the case files, and you talk to people who, not just family or friends, but lived in the area at the time, and not even like Yuba City, but also the Plumas. You find that there was so much going on and so many bad people, here and there, and just things that were going down that it just adds to the story and makes you wonder, like, could this be tied into it? Like, like you talked about the marijuana growing up there. There was other drug activities up there in the Plumas. We talk about the town bully. We talk about Shones, but, I've heard other people who possibly could be tied to the case because they were just, tough guys up in that area who, really didn't mess around. And, we've also talked about the whole survivalist mentality and the drug dealing up there. People who just maybe didn't appreciate having strangers come up. And I mean, there's a lot of what ifs. And so, just trying to find more information, I think, is huge for the case.
I think it's really important. You mentioned it earlier too. I think it's really important to remember that we're dealing with victim types that are generally disregarded,
Right.
and special needs victims are forgotten a lot of the times, even in modern cases. So it's they're in disregard is probably the wrong term. Their capacity is diminished, and then therefore their choices are questioned, and it's usually lumped into, well, it's just some dumb people making dumb mistakes, and it's really a shame. That happened in the 70s. It happens today when we're dealing with these things as well. So I think it's really important. I think Tony's book is really important as well in shining a light on victims, in special needs victims. At the very, if I can use a term like that, that don't get the press and the attention that they should, even in their chronological context. But yeah, so good job, Tony.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, the book is Things Aren't Right, The Disappearance of the Yuba County Five. Again, that's written by Tony Wright. Tony, where can we get this book at?
You can get it at Amazon. It's also available. You can order through Barnes & Noble. But if you go through Amazon, you can get the Kindle version or you can get the paperback version. You can also order directly from Genius Book Publishing. So you've got some options for getting your copy of the book. And so I definitely say either Genius Book Publishing or Amazon. You'll definitely get yourself a copy.
All right. And if people want to get in contact with you, do you want to plug your social media?
Sure. With Instagram, it's Tony Wright Author. And then there's a Tony Wright Author page on Facebook. So you can find me there. You can talk about the case, learn more about upcoming events that I have. I have a few Zoom sessions, and I'm doing an in-person talk at the end of April in Springfield, Illinois at their library on Saturday. I think it's the 28th. Don't hold me to that date, but it's at the end of the month.
Very cool. All right, Dr. David, how can we support you?
Just go to hayescriminology.com. Always happy to help victim families, organizations, anybody else that needs it, case analysis, behaviorism, missing persons, all around. Never charge for anything, of course. That's not why we do this. So if you need anything, please go to hayescriminology.com, and I'm here to help.
All right. Well, if you want to support me, you can start off by liking and subscribing to Santana True Crime. You can also get my book, A Murder on Campus, A Professor, the Cop, and North Carolina's Most Notorious Cold Case. I wrote that with my brother, Dr. Brian Santana. Tony and David, thank you so much again for coming on the show, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.